Hello and welcome to Unacademy, a one-stop destination for the English medium civil services aspirants. A very good morning and welcome to the most comprehensive Hindu analysis on YouTube. So let's start our discussion by first looking at the topics that we are going to discuss. From the Delhi edition of the Hindu, I have chosen 9 important articles for a detailed analysis. With regard to PIB coverage, yesterday, trust me, there weren't any important PIB press releases. But there are few PIB related data that I'll be integrating into our discussion within these given 9 articles. So let's cover these topics comprehensively so that you don't have to go back and read the newspaper again. But before we start, I have two very important announcements. If you're looking for a guided program with mentorship from your educators, then Unacademy is providing the Iconic Pro offer at just 74,999. Under this program, you will not only get access to all the benefits of Unacademy Plus and Iconic, which includes live and recorded lectures, study material, study books, test series, etc. But in Iconic Pro, you will get access to video mentorship, one on one mentorship with your educators. Each teacher takes on a small batch of 30 students, and we maintain regular touch with the students, at least a couple of sessions a month to guide the students, provide any doubt resolution, strategy, motivation, etc. Plus, this will also give you access to unlimited mentorship from our subject experts who have at least appeared in the mains exam, along with access to our test series and optional subjects. So, this offer, I'm told, ends on the 24th of July. So, those of you who are interested to enroll, please check out the link provided below and don't forget to enter the code IAS English in order to avail the discounted price. I'm told it's an early bird offer and only 30 students per teacher would be allowed in their batches. Now, the other important announcement is with regard to our free NCRT series, which is going on our YouTube channel. Every day at 7 p.m., we have been conducting live sessions over the past few days. And currently, Mukesh sir is taking up geography NCRT classes. And today, he will be covering the important topic of atmosphere. So, those of you who are still beginners, who would like to get a strong conceptual base for your core subjects, kindly attend these sessions without fail. So, with this, let's get started and look at the first article. On page number 8 and 14, we have two articles related to the tragedy that has occurred in Sikkim. A massive disaster at the Tista 6 hydropower project, where an underground tunnel where excavation work was going on has witnessed a massive explosion of most likely methane gas and has killed 15 workers. A total of 25 workers were trapped. Rescue operations are still going on. And out of them, at least 15 workers have already lost their lives in this tragic episode. So, this is again a clear environmental hazard and a lesson in disaster management, a lesson in handling man made disasters. So let's look at this editorial in detail. We'll go beyond the article as well to understand why such projects in hazardous areas they deserve greater caution. It requires better preparedness, planning, and a better disaster management approach to prevent these tragedies from recurring again and again. Because every time these tragedies occur, it is the poor workers who always pay the price with very little accountability on the project developer and the government officials. For example, earlier this year, there was a similar tragedy in Meghalaya. I'm sure many of you must remember this. A illegal coal mine witnessed a massive tragedy where several workers were trapped and eventually got killed. Then, a couple of years ago in Uttarakhand in 2023, if you remember the road tunnel collapse that had trapped nearly 41 workers, they were trapped for almost 17 days before they had to be rescued. So these tragedies they keep recurring again and again. And the current tragedy where it has occurred in Sikkim at the foothills of Himalayas along the Tista River is not new to such disasters. Recently, one of the Tista hydropower projects witnessed a massive disaster, a flash flood that was triggered by a glacial lake outburst flood event when the South Lonak Lake it burst out and caused a massive flash flood down the stream and killed up to 100 people in the downstream area. So, the foothills of Himalayas, which is located in seismic zone 4, is already facing a heightened risk of seismic activity. Any large construction projects that involves tunneling, underground excavation, or controlled explosions which are carried out, they come with an added risk. So when you look at the various projects that take place in the Himalayan belt from Uttarakhand to Sikkim to Arunachal Pradesh, many of these projects are essential. They are required from a economic perspective. They are necessary for national security. They are required for local development. Many of these projects are of even national importance. Important bridges, tunnels, hydropower projects, or road connectivity projects. They are very crucial for economic and security reasons. Yes, pursuing these projects is absolutely essential. But given the hazard which is already present in the Himalayan belt, given the environmental risk and the disaster risk which is already prevalent over here, adequate precaution has to be taken because these are recurring mistakes that keep happening again and again. And it's not that there have been no warnings. Now, when you look at the tragedy that has occurred in Sikkim with regard to the Tista project, it was essentially flammable gas that was trapped underground. Now, this was not entirely unknown. See, as you know, the Himalayas are young, fractured mountains which have trapped a lot of deposits of flammable material, including flammable gas such as methane. So, during excavation or controlled explosions, when the methane deposit gets exposed and comes in contact with the air outside, it triggers a immediate explosion. And there are certain measures through which this can be regulated, controlled, and contained. So, installation of gas detectors and early warning systems, then proper studies, the geological studies of the region to predetermine the sites of these flammable deposits so that adequate precautionary measures can be taken while the excavation work is being carried out. And that is exactly what is missing. Now, when you take the Teesta 6 hydropower project, flammable gas deposits were discovered here back in the year 2009. In fact, the project proponent, the National Hydropower Corporation Limited, which had awarded the project to a contractor back in 2009, it had come out with a research paper. Its own engineers who had worked on the project, they had come out with a research paper pointing out methane deposits at the Teesta hydropower sites. And this is a well-known common occurrence across the foothills of Himalayas, especially in the Sikkim belt. Now, when you look at the Teesta River, which originates in the Kanchenjunga Biosphere Reserve at the Kangse Glacier, it flows down into Sikkim via Siliguri corridor, reaches West Bengal and then Bangladesh. And it's a critical water source for all the concerned states that are present over here. So, from Sikkim to West Bengal, there are multiple dam projects, hydropower projects that are present, which helps in hydropower generation or storing water for irrigation, drinking water, industrial usage, etc. So, pursuing the projects are absolutely necessary in national interest. And as you know, the Tista River is also a source of dispute, an international dispute between India and Bangladesh, as it's a transboundary river. And we are yet to resolve the Tista water sharing dispute with Bangladesh. Now, given the importance of the river itself, it is of utmost importance to ensure adequate care, precaution is exercised, both from an environmental perspective and disaster management perspective. When the environmental risk is known, the disaster risk is already made very clear. The lack of precautions, the lack of safety measures is quite shocking. As I said, the NHPC's own research paper back in 2009 itself had flagged the concern of methane blocks and deposits. And despite this, the new contractor who has been executing the project has clearly not taken the required precautions. And the responsibility lies with all these entities: the contractor, the project proponent, the government officials, etc. And the failure to fix accountability would lead these accidents to keep recurring in one place or the other. And as I said, it's eventually poor workers who will pay the price. So that's why they should be treated as a lesson in disaster management, in environmental sustainability. There needs to be a certain precaution exercised when you pursue these critical projects in very sensitive, ecologically sensitive areas. So, based on what we have discussed, take up this practice question for your mains answer writing practice. Now, let's move to the next article on page number 8. There's a column focusing on the significance of the Bab-el-Mandeb Strait and the new emerging threat that could disrupt shipping along the Red Sea route. If you remember, just a few days ago, we had discussed how the Houthis have announced a blockade of the Red Sea route. According to reports, Iran, which is known to sponsor the Houthi rebels in Yemen, it has directed the Houthis, who act as a proxy of Iran as part of its axis of resistance, to blockade Bab el Mandeb and to target the shipping in the Red Sea route to basically shut off this critical trade artery in order to exert pressure on the global economy. This is a result of the ongoing war between US, Iran, and Israel and Iran. Iran has already choked the Hormuz Strait, leveraged the geographical advantage to gain an upper hand over the United States, and the US has still not been able to open up the Hormuz Strait. So now, as the war escalates and as US continues to target Iranian infrastructure from bridges to power plants, reportedly Iran has now directed its proxy, the Houthis in Yemen, to start targeting the Bab el-Mandeb Strait and the shipping that passes through Red Sea route and impose a blockade over here. Now, it remains uncertain whether the Houthis have the capability to do that. Though they can disrupt shipping, though they can fire few missiles and drones at some of the vessels passing through Bab el-Mandeb, do they really have the ability to place a long-term blockade and cut off the Red Sea route? That remains questionable. But however, when you understand the importance of Bab el-Mandeb and Red Sea route, you will realize why even the slightest threat from Houthis could be extremely dangerous. Because Red Sea route offers a shortcut between Indian Ocean and the Atlantic, between Eastern Hemisphere and the Western Hemisphere. Before the Suez Canal was built hundreds of years ago, the traditional shipping route between the Eastern and Western Hemisphere was to circumnavigate across Africa around the Cape of Good Hope, which is a much longer route, circuitous route, time consuming, and also the cost will increase. And this will have a cascading effect as the higher prices will essentially be transmitted across logistics and transportation sector, eventually affecting the prices of key commodities and key imports. Now, the Red Sea route links the Mediterranean Sea with the Arabian Sea. And as you can see, there are important narrow choke points. Suez Canal itself being a choke point, and the entire Red Sea corridor being a very narrow shipping corridor. Then you have Bab el Mandeb over here, located near Horn of Africa and the Arabian Peninsula, facing countries like Djibouti and Yemen. That is what gives strategic significance to countries like Djibouti and Yemen, as they oversee the Bab el Mandeb Strait, which is a very, very narrow choke point, much narrower than Hormuz Strait. And thousands of ships pass through this route, carrying nearly 12% of global maritime trade. There are strategic ports along the Red Sea route as well. Like Saudi Arabia has Jeddah and other strategic ports through which Saudi Arabia supplies oil, gas, etc. Then you have Port Sudan on the other side, which has been in the news because of the ongoing civil war and conflict in Sudan. Then Egypt has important ports located along this route, from the port of Suez to vital ports along the Egyptian uh, sector of the coastline. Then Israel also has the port of Eilat, which recently declared bankruptcy because of the war and the disruption of Red Sea route. Port operations at Eilat have collapsed, and the company that operated the port of Eilat, which is Israel's only port facing the Red Sea route, has been now shut and it has declared bankruptcy. Jordan also has a port facility at Aqaba, which is in the Gulf of Aqaba. So this entire sea route has some strategic ports. It's vital for shipping and particularly for energy supplies. And India has a lot of dependency on this trade route. Nearly a third of India's overall trade passes through Bab-el-Mandeb. We depend on this route for exporting our goods to North Africa, Europe, and beyond. We also procure key raw materials and resources through this route. Hence, the Bab-el-Mandeb Red Sea route is a lifeline for Indian economy. Now, Indian economy has already taken a massive hit because of the Hormuz blockade. So we can't afford any further destabilization of trade routes and shipping channels, particularly the Bab-el-Mandeb route. That's why the writer is urging India to be proactive, to work with like-minded partners, and to deploy the Indian Navy, to deploy a task force to stabilize the shipping channel and to deter any threats. Because see, when the Gaza war began in 2023, back then the Houthis had disrupted shipping in the Red Sea route. At least until 2024, the Houthis kept attacking commercial vessels and cargo ships, which were allegedly linked with Israel and US. And from Red Sea to Arabian Sea, multiple attacks were reported. In fact, Indian Navy even rescued one vessel which had been struck by a Houthi drone. There was a Houthi missile attack that came very close to India's coastline as well. So the Indian Navy has been proactively involved in the last 3 years. The United States worked with its allies, including Singapore, Sri Lanka, and many others, and had launched Operation Prosperity Guardian. Then European powers from UK to France and the EU Naval Task Force, they had launched their own parallel operation, mainly to stabilize the shipping channel and to counter the Houthis. But however, in the last 3 years, Houthi capabilities have largely been weakened because Israel, which has faced direct attacks from Houthis, has carried out unilateral action against Yemen, targeting the key infrastructure of the Houthis. It has bombed the Sana'a airport. It has almost decimated the strategic Hodeidah port of Yemen, controlled by the Houthis. It has targeted the military and the command establishment of the Houthis, and it has significantly weakened their capabilities. So these Israeli strikes, along with the American military operations, accompanied with European military operations, it has already weakened the Houthis, but they still retain some capability to cause significant damage and concern. And that is why India should proactively engage with countries that already have a presence and influence over here. See, China operates its one and only foreign naval base in the small African nation of Djibouti. So, China, given that it has close ties with Iran, one can assume that it has the ability to engage with Houthis to secure its interests. Because China also has a lot of dependency on Bab el Mandeb and the Red Sea route. China will protect its trade interests by directly working with Iran and the Houthis, and it'll use its military naval base in Djibouti. And that is exactly what India can do as well. Though India doesn't have a naval base here or any access to military facilities, but we do have partners who are closely aligned with India. We have countries like France, Japan, Italy, and even United States. All these countries have naval bases in Djibouti. So please make a note of this. Djibouti, that oversees Bab el Mandeb, is home to multiple foreign naval bases from US to France, Japan to Italy. These countries can potentially allow Indian Navy to play a role in securing the Red Sea trade corridor by working with France and Japan, especially, with whom we share very close strategic ties. We can think of a combined task force with clear rules of engagement to deploy naval vessels, aircraft, etc., that's required to deter the Houthis and to stabilize this shipping channel. So that is what this article is recommending, that India should be proactive to secure its interests along the Bab-el-Mandeb Strait, or else the economic consequences will be severe. So based on what we have covered, please take up this mains practice question and practice your answer writing. Now let's move to another important article on page number 10. This article is focusing on the legality of internet shutdowns in the country. The topic is in news because on the 20th of July, during the massive student-led protests at Jantar Mantar and the protest led by the Cockroach Janta Party, the government suspended internet across central parts of Delhi. Now, this generated a lot of criticism, a lot of concern, because for several hours, internet connection was completely suspended. Mobile connectivity was completely taken off air in multiple locations in central Delhi. Now, this did not happen in some conflict zone. It was not Manipur, it was not Jammu and Kashmir. This was happening in the heart of the national capital, where for nearly 10 to 12 hours, the government had ordered the service providers and internet service providers to completely suspend connectivity. Now, the question is, why do governments suspend internet? Is there a legitimate reason behind it? What is the legality of suspending internet services? And what are the judicial precedents that exist? And if there is any illegality involved in these orders, can you challenge those orders? Can you get a reprieve from the courts? That is what we'll try to learn and understand in this important article. See, when it comes to access to internet, access to any form of digital, mobile, and telephone based connectivity, of course, the government can restrict access on certain grounds. If there is a public emergency, if there is a serious threat to public order, in the interest of security of the state, sovereignty of the nation, on specific grounds, the government can definitely curb access to such connectivity on specific grounds, right? Mainly to prevent the spread of misinformation, to prevent any possible riots or any security situations that might develop, which could be a big disruption to public order, which could threaten lives. In these circumstances, the government can definitely order the suspension of these internet services and telecom services. Now, what is the legality behind this? See, earlier we had the Indian Telegraph Act, a British era colonial law of 1885, and the temporary suspension of telecom services rules of 2017. These were the previous um, basis that was used, the legal basis to suspend internet and telecom services. One was the Indian Telegraph Act and the Telecom Suspension Rules of 2017. But now these are outdated. Why? Because it has been replaced by the Telecommunication Act 2023 and Telecommunication Temporary Suspension of Services Rules 2024. So a new law and a new set of rules have replaced the old legislation and the old set of rules. But however, what is shocking is that many state governments, they continue to issue blocking orders based on the provisions of Indian Telegraph Act and the suspension rules of 2017. For example, recently in Uttar Pradesh, the UP police had ordered suspension of internet for several hours by using the provisions of Indian Telegraph Act, which essentially is outdated. It has been replaced by a new law, the Telecommunications Act, and it is now governed by the Telecommunications Temporary Suspension of Services Rules 2024. So yes, there is a legal basis to suspend internet and to block access to these services. Now, on what specific grounds and under what specific circumstances can this legal power be used by the government? Under Section 20, Clause 2, Subclause B of Telecommunications Act. As I said, if there is a immediate threat of an occurrence of a public emergency, or if there is a direct threat involved to public safety and to law and order, on specific grounds, the government can issue written orders. It has to be a written order. It can't be through oral communication. It can't be through any informal channel. The concerned authority, as designated under the suspension rules of 2024, which would be the Department of Telecom, written orders have to be issued by clearly stating the reason as well, right? The location, the duration, everything has to be specified. It can't be an indefinite ban. It can't be placed for weeks and months together, as it was seen in Jammu and Kashmir during the abrogation of Article 370. Because that's when this matter reached the Supreme Court, and a landmark judgment was delivered with the Supreme Court in the Anuradha Basin case. Any such action by the government should match or meet the test of proportionality. The action should be proportional to the threat, and there should be a real perceived threat. Just because there is some protest going on, internet cannot be suspended. That is blatantly illegal action. Now, when you look at the protest of 20th July, at least in the morning hours, there was no intent on the part of the protesters to commit any acts of violence. It was clearly as visible a peaceful protest where students were exercising their democratic right. So, ordering the suspension of internet, even before an actual threat emerged, could be called into question in a court of law on the grounds of its illegality. It can be questioned, it can be brought up. You can use the writ jurisdiction under Article 32, Article 226, and approach the concerned High Court or the Supreme Court, challenging the legality of these actions. Because, as I said, any such orders should be written orders. It should contain the reason why the suspension is being ordered, and clearly it should specify the location, the duration. According to reports, more than 150 cell towers were asked to be shut down. And this is indeed a massive suspension of services, right? It goes against your fundamental right to free speech and expression, and as well as your fundamental right to trade, right, which is covered under Article 19. Of course, these are not absolute rights. It is subjected to reasonable restrictions. But when you look at India's experience with internet shutdowns, most civil society groups, global organizations, they believe that India is the internet shutdown capital of the world, which witnesses one of the highest number of shutdowns in a given year. In 2025 alone, 65 shutdowns at least were recorded across 12 states and union territories, especially in Jammu and Kashmir, Manipur, Rajasthan, and in many other parts of India. So, be it the central government or be it the concerned state governments, both have a propensity to order suspension of internet and telecom services, even at the slightest hint of trouble. Just because there is some protest, you can't order suspension of internet services. There has to be a real perceived threat to public safety, to law and order. There has to be a real public emergency. Only then these extraordinary powers can be utilized. It should meet the test of proportionality, as I said, which was laid down under the Anuradha Basin judgment in 2020, right? It should balance your fundamental right under Article 19, Clause 1, Subclause A and G, that guarantees right to free speech and expression and the right to freedom of trade. So this is something the Supreme Court has clearly established. This should be the least restrictive measure, meaning the government should consider other measures which might be available to deal with the challenges and the threat. And internet shutdown should be a last resort, because denying access to internet and telecom services will violate your fundamental rights under Article 19. So it should be a least restrictive measure. It should be on legitimate grounds. There should be a written order. The reasons have to be specified. It should be for a specific duration and for specific locations. You can't impose the shutdown for one entire state, right? Or across multiple states. It has to be specific to where the threat might be present. And the duration also has to be limited. There should be a multi member committee which will review these orders within 5 working days, and if required, reverse the orders to shut down the internet. So these checks and balances, precautions are already built into the system. So now, if the orders are deemed to be imposed in an illegal manner, it can be challenged in the court. As I said, under the writ jurisdiction of the High Court and Supreme Court, it can be challenged on whether these orders are legal and constitutional. Now, coming to the next article, we have an update with regard to India China relations, India Russia relations, and the Quad grouping. In Manila, that is in Philippines, the ASEAN foreign ministers meeting has been taking place. The 11 foreign ministers of 11 ASEAN countries, they meet regularly, and they also invite their dialogue partners to participate in the foreign ministers meeting. So ASEAN has multiple dialogue partners like India, China, Japan, Australia, US, Russia. All these are dialogue partners of ASEAN. So during ASEAN foreign ministers meeting, the foreign ministers of the dialogue partner countries are also invited, which means India was also invited, and India's foreign minister, Dr. Jaishankar, was a participant. So, given the opportunity that was created here, Dr. Jaishankar has met with the Chinese state counselor, the equivalent of Chinese foreign minister, Wang Yi, and both sides have taken stock of the improvement which is taking place in the relationship between the two countries. Both sides have reiterated that as long as peace and tranquility is maintained along the border area, only then normal ties can be maintained. Now, after the Kazan summit, where India China had agreed to resolve their differences and not allow differences to turn into conflict, we had managed to stabilize the situation along the border, and normal ties have resumed in the last few months. Now, India has resumed direct flights to China. Visa services have been resumed. The Kailash Manasarovar Yatra has been restarted. And even cross border trade through strategic Himalayan passes like Lipu Lake has been restarted. So, both sides have now pledged to maintain this normalcy by protecting the peace and tranquility along the line of actual control. Then, coming to Dr. Jaishankar's interaction with the Russian foreign minister, Sergei Lavrov, India used this opportunity to not just carry out a complete review of India-Russia relations, but we also used this opportunity to express our strong protest against the latest Russian action in the Black Sea. Yesterday, remember, we discussed that a Russian strike against a commercial vessel at the Odessa port has killed 4 Indian seafarers. So this represents a serious risk for Indian seafaring community. So India has protested against this. We had summoned the Russian ambassador as well. And now Foreign Minister Jaishankar has raised this issue with the Russian counterpart, urging Russia to not target commercial vessels in the ongoing Ukraine conflict. Now coming to the Quad countries. The Quad foreign ministers meeting has also taken place on the sidelines of the ASEAN foreign ministers meeting. The Quad, as you know, includes India, United States, Japan, and Australia. There have been some serious concerns about the very role of the Quad group in recent years because the United States appears to be sidelining the Quad, especially under Donald Trump. India was supposed to host the Quad summit. First, Biden said he couldn't travel to India in 2024. Then, Trump has never made it to India, and the Quad summit has never taken place after that, right? So, India never got the chance to host the Quad summit. And India sees the Quad as a pivotal platform to maintain a free and open nature of Indo-Pacific and enforce rules-based order in the Indo-Pacific. It is seen as a platform to counter Chinese aggression in the Indo-Pacific. That's exactly what Japan and Australia also believe in. But United States of late has been giving signals that it is sidelining the Quad to some extent. So the Quad summit at the leaders level has not taken place in the last couple of years. But at least a foreign ministers meeting is a positive sign. So the 4 foreign ministers have met, including the Secretary of State Marco Rubio, and they've taken stock of all the key challenges and concerns in the Indo-Pacific. So this is one small update about the ASEAN foreign ministers meeting. Next, with regard to the FCRA bill, which has generated a lot of controversy, the government has issued a clarification regarding the meaning of designated authority. See, the FCRA bill, the Foreign Contribution Regulation Amendment Bill 2026, which has been tabled in the parliament and is now being examined by a parliamentary committee, it has raised a lot of criticism and opposition. Because, see, the main purpose of the bill is to better regulate foreign funding of NGOs, non government organizations, to ensure they don't resort to any foreign exchange violations and money manipulations, or foreign funds are not misused for anti national activities which could threaten India's national security and stability. So, the government of India is contemplating a set of legislative changes to tighten the strings over NGOs which are non compliant with the regulations laid down by the government. So, amongst the regulations proposed, one regulation is to establish a designated authority which can manage the assets of a NGO whose license has been cancelled or not renewed or suspended. Let's say there's an NGO in any field of work, in social work, in let's say in religious activity, or in environmental work, or in human rights domain, whatever. If let's say a NGO has not renewed its license, or if let's say it had uh, carried out some violations and its license has been suspended or cancelled, in these circumstances, what will happen to the foreign assets of that NGO? Will that NGO continue to exercise controlling authority over those assets? That was the question. So now the amendment bill proposes the establishment of a designated authority which will take over these foreign assets and administer them. Now, this designated authority can transfer those assets, can sell those assets as it deems fit. Now, this had been criticized, especially by religious organizations, by minority religious groups, by stating that this would alter the very nature of the work that they do. And it would even affect the place of worship, which might be dependent on these funds, which could lead to the altering of the religious character of that place of worship. So now the government has clarified, it has issued a fact check. That's why I said I'll be referring to PIB. A PIB press release has also been issued, clarifying this confusion. This designated authority will not act without any rationality. It has a clear mandate which will be provided to it. It will only control the foreign assets of that NGO only in case of license not being renewed or license being cancelled or suspended. Now, there is a big myth that if NGO loses a license or if it is cancelled, automatically it's assumed that NGO has done something wrong. That's not the case. In many instances, the government itself has clarified that NGOs often get their license suspended or cancelled because they may not have gone through all the paperwork. There are administrative delays, bureaucratic delays as well. So even in genuine circumstances, there is a possibility of licenses being suspended, cancelled, and it would be renewed at a later date. So once the license is renewed, the assets will then be transferred back to that concerned NGO. And also, this entire decision of the designated authority is open to appeal. It's open to judicial review. A lot of confusion had been created that it can't be challenged. Now, the government has made it very clear that these decisions of the designated authority will be open to challenge at the district courts. And they will only take over the foreign assets of such NGOs and manage them. And if, let's say, the license is renewed, then the assets are transferred back to this NGO. So, this clarification has been issued by the union government to pacify the critics and the opponents who were criticizing some of the controversial provisions of the FCRA bill. Next, Donald Trump's 200% tariff threat against pharmaceutical imports is now posing a very, very big challenge for Indian pharmaceutical industry. See, Donald Trump has recently announced that starting from August 2026, all the way till August 2028, a new tariff regime will begin against pharmaceutical imports into the United States. First, US will provide a zero tariff window, zero duty window for 2 years. Then the tariffs will increase to 100% for 1 year. And from August 2028, the tariff will jump to 200%. So, this is the new tariff policy that the Trump administration is introducing against pharmaceutical imports. The goal is to curb imports and to promote domestic production in the US. They want to push foreign suppliers to set up manufacturing in the US and reduce the American dependency on medical imports and pharmaceutical imports. Now, this is something which could significantly hurt Indian interests. Because, see, India is considered as the pharmacy of the world, particularly when it comes to generic drugs. India's pharma exports, they stand at roughly $25.8 billion. dollars. Now, out of this total export of pharma products, nearly 37% of this, almost $9.7 billion worth of pharma products are exported to the US market. So basically, United States is one of the critical markets for our pharma industry. Out of all the generic medicines that are prescribed in the US healthcare industry, 47% of those drugs, the generic medicines, they are from Indian origin, which means Indian pharma has a major dependency on the American market. So these tariffs will definitely impact Indian pharma companies. The 2 year zero duty window will, of course, give some reprieve. For 2 years, it will be zero duty access, which will be beneficial. But most pharma companies agree that it is illogical to shift their manufacturing and operations to US. They can't disrupt their supply chains and shift their entire manufacturing to US just to access their market. And they can't do it within 2 years. And it doesn't make any financial sense. So, what will happen from 2027, 2028 onwards? The imposition of 100% tariffs first and then raising it to 200% could basically destroy India's pharma exports to the American market. But experts believe that maybe we can utilize the 2 year zero duty window to work out an arrangement. And also, Indian pharma products being very cheap compared to other patented drugs. Some experts believe that our generic drugs will still remain competitive, will still remain cheaper compared to other patented products. So this is one serious concern that now India is facing because of Trump's erratic policies. The next article, the central government is considering a major liberalization move with regard to ownership of airports in the country. See, India has a very important restriction on airport owners and airline owners. Cross ownership is not allowed as of now. Cross ownership is explicitly prohibited. What does it mean? It means an airport operator cannot start an airline. It's not allowed. An airline operator cannot gain ownership, majority stake in an airport. So this cross ownership is prohibited both ways. Is that clear? For example, a airline company like, let's say, Indigo, Air India, they can't acquire majority stake in an Indian airport as of now. Or any major airport operator in the country, like Adani Group, for example, which operates multiple airports in India, they will not be allowed to start an airline of their own because there could be a conflict of interest. If the same company owns the airport and an airline, they will obviously try to give priority for their own flight schedules. And this could be discriminatory for other airline companies and operators. It could basically kill competition in the civil aviation industry. But now India is willing to move beyond this, to deregulate and remove these restrictions and allow for cross ownership. The idea is being discussed by the Ministry of Civil Aviation along with the Niti Aayog. Once a final proposal is brought up, it will be submitted to the Union Cabinet for a final approval. Because see, right now, the Tata Group, which owns Air India in collaboration with Singapore Airlines, it's very keen to invest in airports as well. Same goes for Indigo. Same goes for Adani Group, which owns many airports. Most likely, they would be looking to start an airline. So the government is keen to allow cross ownership to create more opportunities. And the proposal is now being considered by the government. Now let's move to the prelim section and let's take a quick look at the two small articles. On page number 6, there is an article related to polity. It focuses on the Cauvery Water Management Authority. The Cauvery Water Management Authority has ordered both government of Karnataka and Tamil Nadu to maintain status quo with regard to water release and water utilization with regard to the Cauvery River. As you know, the Cauvery River is a source of dispute between Karnataka and Tamil Nadu. And because of the deficit in monsoon rainfall and the shortage of rainfall in the catchment basin, there is a big shortage of water being reported in the dams and reservoirs, both in Karnataka and Tamil Nadu. Karnataka has released around just 0.54 TMC feet of water in July, which is slightly below than what was awarded to Tamil Nadu through a Supreme Court's ruling. Now, the Cauvery Water Management Authority not only monitors the enforcement of the Supreme Court order, it essentially maintains monitoring of the dams and reservoirs and the water levels and provides for enforcement of the tribunal award, which was upheld by the Supreme Court. So, given the serious situation which is developing in Karnataka and Tamil Nadu, the Cauvery Water Management Authority has ordered both sides to maintain the status quo, to not divert water for any other purposes apart from drinking. So, water now cannot be used for irrigation or for any other purposes. Whatever water is available, if it is used judiciously by both sides, it will address the drinking water demand until the next rainfall season. That's why it has ordered both governments to maintain status quo with regard to water release. Now, the Cauvery Water Management Authority, please note, is a quasi judicial body set up by the Government of India in 2018 under the Interstate River Water Disputes Act 1956. Now, can you find out the constitutional provision that deals with interstate water disputes? Which article is it? Please mention that in the comments. So, the Cauvery Water Management Authority looks at water allocation, sharing of waters between two states. It monitors the water levels in the dams and reservoirs. It verifies whether Karnataka is abiding by its obligations, whether Tamil Nadu is following its commitments, and it maintains that supervision over all the reservoirs in the Cauvery water basin. Now, coming to the last article for today, in the supplementary section, there's a very, very important update. A group of Nobel laureates, a group of leading researchers, and many top AI scientists and other experts and luminaries, they've all come together to adopt a declaration. It is called the Rome Declaration for an Unarmed and Disarming Peace. The Rome Declaration for an Unarmed and Disarming Peace. This declaration is basically a warning, it's a wake up call for governments and the global community regarding the potential existential threat that AI and autonomous systems can pose if they were to gain access to nuclear weapons. This is not the stuff of a sci fi movie or a espionage thriller. This is a very real possibility. Many top leading AI scientists, Nobel laureates who have worked in the domain, experts in the AI domain, they all agree that there is a very real possibility that autonomous weapon systems and decision making systems driven by AI algorithms, if they were given access to nuclear weapons, could potentially create an existential threat for humanity. So, to avert this scenario, these experts have adopted the Rome Declaration, urging governments to adopt an international treaty. They are basically giving a push for an international treaty to ban autonomous systems from ever getting access to nuclear launch codes and nuclear weapon systems. So, they have adopted six principles as part of the Rome Declaration, calling for disarming the next arms race, responsible development, including responsible usage of AI, responsible governance and leadership, and eventual nuclear disarmament. So it's a very interesting development, as many experts in the domain believe that autonomous systems, AI systems having access to nuclear weapon systems, launch codes, is extremely dangerous and could someday create an existential threat. So, for this reason, the Rome Declaration for an Unarmed and Disarming Peace has been adopted with these six principles, urging countries to negotiate an international treaty to ban autonomous systems from ever gaining access to nuclear launch codes. So please make a note. We'll continue to track this development. It'll be a developing story for several more months. So this brings my discussion to an end. I hope it was a interesting and insightful session. If you benefited, do let me know through your likes and comments. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Thanks for watching.